Donald Trump may think it's a political winner, but it's a political loser. Oppose Trump deploying in a U.S. city, active duty U.S. military, 61%. The National Guard in particular, 58%. When you get 3 in 5 Americans agreeing on anything, you know if that is on the opposition side, it's a political loser. And among independents, who are, of course, that key block in the middle of the United States political electorate, we're talking about 2/3 of independents there and about who oppose the deployment of either active duty U.S. military or National Guard into U.S. cities.
What are the questions that people are asking, or what are the issues they see with these deployments?
Okay, look, I think it's that they don't buy Donald Trump's case for why these troops must go into the U.S. cities. So the New York.
I think those numbers are still, the numbers on the support side are still unimaginably high. And obviously, in a competent, normal, democratic process, like these numbers are incredible, and it should cause any administration to very quickly turn around and not do this, right? But we don't live in a normal government. We live in an abnormal government, and we live in abnormal times. And the very fact that there are still Republicans who are like, hell yeah, is insane to me. So about what, 39% are just like invested in shooting at anarchist English majors and stuff? Like, is that what's going on? Is that where we're at? That's what I'm supposed to believe? Yeah. Adam Johnson says, engaging with public opinion is useful, but I think it's important to understand that Trump and his close band of ideological confederates do not care about the public opinion. They believe that once they're done, it'll have little bearing on who's in the White House January 21st, 2029. Now, having said that, I don't fully agree with this. The reason why I don't fully agree with this is because while it's correct that the Trump administration doesn't care about public opinion all that much, the goal here for the population in general and for all of you is to get other people on board and make this as costly as possible, make this as difficult a process as possible. When you make this a difficult process, when you don't obey in advance, for example, you cause the administration to reconsider. You cause the administration to think, okay, maybe we can't get away with this. Okay? That's how it works. That's it. That's why discontent is important. That's why discontent is extremely important. That's why protests are extremely important, no matter what the cost.
Times essentially gave you a two-pronged little answer here, right? Trump may use the National Guard to intimidate rivals, or big city crime will spiral out of control if the troops don't go into cities. What you see here is the majority that takes the case is that Trump may use the National Guard to intimidate political rivals at 51%. Just 42% of Americans agree with the Donald Trump stance that, in fact, big city crime will spiral out of control if the National Guard doesn't go into U.S. cities. So essentially what we're seeing here is Donald Trump's making a case, the Democratic opposition's making another case, and the Democratic opposition's case is winning here, and that is a big reason why what you see is you get about 3 in 5 Americans saying they don't want troops going into U.S. cities.
I cannot believe that 42% of Americans think big city crime will spiral out of control without the National Guard, and the only reason why so many Americans polled still to this day believe this insanity is a direct consequence of under the Brandon administration, the liberal media, all of the local news broadcasters, and also the national news broadcasters being completely dominated by reactionary framing on crime and punishment. The notion that these cities are actually on fire, okay? This kind of made up fear mongering has been incredibly effective in brain breaking your elderly relatives. This is something that I have actively pushed back against when Brandon was in charge. And I talked about the crime panic narratives and how damaging that would be eventually. And it has been. I mean, I have all my own relatives that have fallen victim to the crime panic narratives, assuming that Democrats actually don't care about crime at all, and that the only solution to crime is more aggressive apprehension initiatives, more aggressive detainment initiatives. That is precisely where we're at. That we wouldn't have gotten to this point, even the liberal side, if the Democrat side on this argument wasn't also completely leaning into the crime panic narratives out of fears that this was far too good a message being presented by the Republicans.
You have another really interesting way at looking at this. That President Trump seems uniquely focused on Portland, on Memphis, on these cities and crime there. What do voters think he should be focused on?
Okay, so if you saw the opening slide on this.
Proof on Biden. I believe it. I just want to know. Proof on Biden. The media coverage. Go back and look at my analysis and my criticism of the media coverage under the Biden administration about crime panic narratives in blue cities specifically. Mostly pushed by the right, but a lot of, like, if you look at San Francisco, for example, like a lot of the tech CEOs who before they actively before they openly became right wingers, right? They were also leaning into this idea that like George Soros-backed woke prosecutors were actually letting criminals roam free in the streets of San Francisco and in major like Democrat-run cities. One of the best examples of this is like gruesome Governor Gavin Newsom's rehabilitation initiatives that sought to address the overfilling crisis that the California prisons had in an effort to address the major crisis of having California penitentiaries overflowing with people that didn't really need to be there. He tried to get 75,000 prisoners released earlier than they normally would after they had, and there were numerous provisions on this. Like, I think it was, you had to have served 2/3 of your sentence, and you would obviously still be seen by a parole board that would see if you have actually rehabilitated or not, all this stuff. And yet even liberals were very critical of Gavin Newsom and completely leaned into the bullshit framing. It was such endless bad faith argumentation that liberals were completely incapable of pushing back on. Here, this is another fantastic example of this, but with respect to ICE. Okay, Brian Schatz is the United States Senator from Hawaii. Okay, he says, why do we need snipers in our cities? Now, he said this on October 4th. Why are 6 masked men slamming a guy in a wheelchair in the ground? Why would an agent tackle a scared wife? Add the rhetoric of the president is increasing manic and angry senior advisors, and we are at a fork in the road. Adam Johnson says, Brian, you supported doubling ICE's budget last year, backing what you described as a Republican border security bill. Given ICE's lawlessness, do you think in retrospect this was a wise idea? Now, to liberals, this probably comes across as an I told you so moment. Like, this is a cynical, radical leftist by the name of Adam Johnson who's just simply trying to dunk on a Democrat at a time when we need to be united. But this is a very important issue to address because right now we need to be on a defensive posture and we need to be united. We need to express solidarity with everyone, including liberals who are seeking to address some of the problems that this administration is engaging in. Having said that, however, it is important to make sure that liberals do address this dumb fuck behavior. Liberals do address the fact that they also leaned into the crime panic narratives, leaned into the narratives about immigrants constituting a significant national security threat because they are the ones who allowed this to happen. And the reason why we have to address this crisis and the Democrats in power setting up the stage, setting up the standard for Donald Trump to dunk on, okay, is because if in a positive turn, Democrats do come back into power, they cannot repeat these issues. They cannot repeat the same things that they've done that led to this crisis to begin with, okay?
Segment, right? It was, has Trump taken his eye off the ball? The American people believe, yes, John Berman, Donald Trump has taken his eye off the ball. There is too much focus on putting troops into U.S. cities. 52%, the majority of Americans agree that the Trump administration is focusing too much on that. Where do they want him to go? They want him to focus on lowering prices. 75% say there's too little focus on lowering prices. This is the reason that Donald Trump was put into office, was to lower prices. And at this particular point, 3 in 4 Americans say there is too little focus. Donald Trump is focusing on the wrong things, and they don't like the way he's going about it. And this, my friends, will tell the entire story if it holds a year from now, going into the midterm elections. If the Republicans lose control of the House, dare lose control of the Senate, it will be because they believe that Donald Trump has lost focus. He is not keeping his eye on the ball, and I
told you guys over and over again that this would happen eventually, okay? I didn't even think that it would happen this fast, but then again, I also did not think that Donald Trump would be this much of a force. I didn't think he would be this swift in ruining everything and breaking everything, okay? I thought it would have taken a little bit more time.